Please be advised that in order to foster quality discussions in each episode, we will spoil the stories in each game and text we talk about. Good news is, 90% of the titles we cover are old enough that many of you might already know all about them. That said, we do encourage you to play and read before listening. Do you ever worry the moon is just going to crash into the earth and destroy the whole world?
Every day of my life. But what's my biggest fear?
Really?
No.
Oh. Well, I had a nightmare.
You had a nightmare? You're living in a Majora's Mask world?
I had a nightmare that my wife and I went on vacation somewhere in this little town, and we talked to an old man, and he pointed up in the sky and told us to look at the moon. And we're like, wow, that's beautiful. And we watched it, and I was like, hey, that's getting closer, isn't it? And then eventually it was very, very close, and the old man was a little less calm, and this get a little alarming. So I
yeah, I would imagine.
I ran into this house, grabbed my phone, and I looked at the weather to see if the moon was going to crash into the earth. Turns out
on the Weather Channel, the app will tell you the moon's going to explode the earth.
Before I got that far, the moon crashed into the earth.
Oh. So it was coming with some heat.
And it was the wildest thing. It was like the most horrifying nightmare I ever had. Everything just started shaking, and I fell over in this room. And everything just started going black, and then it was like when you turn an old TV off, just.
That sucks.
And then I died, and then I had a moment of peace, but then I woke up.
Well, at least you had the peace before you woke up.
Yeah, that was wild.
When that kind of thing happens, that means there's like a little elf kid who failed his mission. He was supposed to collect a bunch of masks and do a bunch of stupid. That's not. I think Junji Ito also did a story. I think his was the moon that came crashing to Earth. I think it was like a planet or something. I haven't read that one yet. I forget the name of it. But
what was it?
Junji Ito. He does horror mangas. I'm pretty sure he had a. They might even made it into an anime now too. But it was really really creepy. But I just remember like seeing the art for it, and I think it's like a different planet or something. I want to say it has a face too, like Majora's Mask, like the moon, and it's just crashing to Earth or something along those lines. But. That is a horrible. Because you imagine how big it would start to get.
Yeah, it was like when you like in Star Wars, which you hate, when you see like the Death Star coming. It was like that. It looks unreal, but so real.
What would happen if the moon actually did crash into the Earth? How much damage would it cause?
Yeah,
how much would burn up? Because it's not. Yeah, I forget the size comparison, but it's a lot smaller than the Earth.
Yeah. I guess it wouldn't
probably still wipe out all of humanity,
right? Yeah, I would guess because, well, and even so, we can't live without the moon, right?
I mean, we could live. It just the tides would be non-existent, and
don't we need that? Or
there would be no reflection from the moon, which reflects on. I don't know. There's a lot of things that would change, but
I guess we're not scientists. We're
not even close. No,
astronomers or.
I don't think anybody needs the moon. We just like the moon.
Yeah.
Because we're told to like the moon because it's been in existence for our whole entire existence.
Well, the moon didn't, in fact, crash into the Earth in real life, but I think we both were wishing it was about a quarter of the way through this book that we read.
Bryce, I'm going to say something that's going to challenge your perception on Ray Bradbury's Something Wicked This Way Comes.
Okay.
Because I am under the impression by my incessant bitching at the beginning of this book that you think I hate this book. And this turned out to be one of my all-time favorite books. So I am not in your camp anymore.
Really?
Yeah, I read the first 50 pages or so, and I really struggled to get into it, which we will discuss, because of the prose, the style it's written, and mainly I just didn't really care about it. But I also went into this book having just finished the Iliad, and I'm going through the epics. So my mind is not even anywhere near dark fantasy, sci-fi, any kind of genre stuff. So when I first started reading this, I didn't even really want to read it, which was probably a big problem. But then just to get it over with, I did 2 binge reading sessions of like an hour or so, and then I just ended up really loving the book.
Wow.
So
Wow.
sorry to ruin whatever you had planned for this about me being on your side of not liking the book, but
we'll see where this conversation goes. But welcome to Arcade Bookshop, where we talk about video games and their literary counterparts for all of you who love to play and to read. I'm Bryce Yoli, and I'm here with my pal and cousin, Caleb James.
Yeah, buddy.
And we're talking about the book Something Wicked This Way Comes, which is what we think is a good counterpart to our last episode where we talked about Earthbound, the Super Nintendo game. So, first of all, why did we choose this book? Caleb, why the hell did we choose this book?
Well, originally we planned to do It because we needed a coming-of-age story that deals with monsters, just a lot of fun weirdness as well.
Right.
And we didn't choose it mainly because it's a very long book.
Right.
And also Earthbound, while it does have some elements that are a little more adult, it's not quite It level adult. There's no sex.
Yeah.
I mean, it has like I'm not going to go into detail, but at the end there is a scene amongst the children that's quite gross. Why Stephen King wrote it, I would imagine cocaine had a lot to do with that. But not getting into that, it did seem like it was a good fit. But then we picked this, which was actually interesting because this was a huge influence on Stephen King and most likely why he wrote it.
Right.
Because he was a big fan of something. Many authors at the time actually came, like Neil Gaiman was another one that really enjoyed the book. A lot of people took a lot away from this, which is why when I started reading, I slowed down and was like, okay, maybe there's something to this that I need to focus more on.
Yeah, and yeah, it is a good counterpart because, you know, it has like innocent kids, but they're like really interested in the world, and they like to test the world, and they like adventure, and you know, ultimately they end up, or that they're striving to save their town from evil or what they think is evil, and you know, and I mean even like a couple chapters in that Ray Bradbury used the word Earthbound.
He did use Earthbound. It was like it was meant to be, wasn't it?
It was wild. But what was I gonna say?
There was a carnival in Earthbound. Well, kind of. There's a tent, and yeah,
that too. And while I was reading the book, it was interesting. It's like I don't love the way it's written, but you could really feel where I really felt like Stephen King in that book. Like you could see like that's where he got his writing style.
Oh, for sure.
It's really weird because like I like the way Stephen King's voice is usually, and there are aspects of this that I like the same. I like the same feel of it, but ultimately I don't love the way this book is written.
It grew on me because I was in your camp like I said at the beginning. I did not care for how it was written because I don't have a problem with like the poetic prose style.
Yeah,
but it almost felt like it's hard to say because if you read like an H.P. Lovecraft, a Poe, any of that kind of stuff, you know you're reading something very dated. It's aged. It's not going to read the same as modern fiction. Even though this is more modern, it came across like that, but in a way that wasn't. I can't think of the right word, but in a way that just didn't hit you the same, you know? It's like you went into it reading, and it's like, this is not difficult to read, but I find myself rereading a lot.
Yeah.
And I don't know why, because it's not like it's not using crazy vocabulary. It's not outrageous sentence structure, or the grammar's not hard to follow. It's written normally in that regard, but it's just the way it's written. It's very hard to describe.
Well, it's like it's almost like it's almost like it's an epic poem. Like
kind of, yeah.
It's like it's weird because it's so blatantly a narrative, but just the way the exposition is and the way the dialogue is intermingled, you have to keep like retreading because it's almost like too simple. You're like, what am I missing here? Am I missing something, or is it as simple as it's coming off?
Yeah, you never know what's deep and what's not.
Yeah.
And then another aspect too that I found a little hard to follow was that the dialogue often was written in the same way that the prose is written, and people don't speak like that. Like there's a lot of not monologues, but you know, like the dad in the book, he goes on different like lecture kind of things for a little bit, but it's like the way you're speaking is weird.
Yeah.
It's almost like you're not Shakespearean, but kind of. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, obviously the title, Something Wicked This Way, comes from the, with the prick of my thumb, Something Wicked This Way comes from
Right.
Macbeth. But Bradbury was obviously influenced by that, and maybe that's why he wrote it this way. But the dialogue should not be, especially because it's set in like the 50s or 60s,
Yeah.
and it's already, again, dated. So, like, some of the stuff I was not interested in. The evil in this story, compared to what we consider evil in modern fiction, is nothing. I mean, which is why it fits with Earthbound so well, because Earthbound is like the simplistic story, which we discussed on that episode, about why kids would feel, so threatened by these minor things. Well, it would scare children. A carnival, obviously. They're made to be creepy, and obviously the character, which we didn't even break down the synopsis or anything of the story yet.
I was gonna get there.
Okay, next. But the main character, the illustrated man, Mr. Dark, he's considered one of the best characters in fiction as like a villain, which is also a Disney movie made of this I want to watch from the 70s.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'll finish up real quick here. So these kids are scared in this world, but as an outside viewer, some of it does get like, oh shit, okay, I feel it now, and there's some themes that we'll touch on that are really creepy, but compared to a modern lens, it's not really like scary, but I don't think it's supposed to be, but maybe at the time.
Yeah, and that's what I was feeling. Like it's not scary at all now, but I don't know if maybe this was one of the first times that people started, or that someone wrote about carnies and and like the whole like American Horror Story, that one season, which was like actually disgusting.
It was pretty gross, yeah.
But maybe it was the first time that people talked about, or someone talked about the carnival, the weirdness and all the, and like the creeps that are actually part of it sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And, it probably was weird back then. But let's break down the story.
Yeah, we got to do that because for those who haven't actually read the book or know anything about it, because this is like what is this, like a 60-year-old? I don't know. It's an old book now.
Yeah, so most people have probably read it, maybe. This is my second time through. But so basically it's about a couple of kids, Will Nightshade.
Incorrect. Will Halloway
and Jim Nightshade.
Which Nightshade is an awesome name.
It is.
And they even bring up at the end of this, because the carnival's called like Dark and Kugel, I think, or something like that. Cougar, something. And then the spoiler, the one guy is not around anymore, and then the guy gets Jim, and he's like, hey, why don't you could be the part of the carnival, part owner, and it'll be Dark and Nightshade. I was like, that's a fucking awesome name. Go on.
Yeah, well, it's about these couple of kids. In the beginning, this guy is coming around selling lightning rods.
Yeah, the lightning rod salesman. That's another part. The beginning, I was kind of confused what was even happening. I was like, is this guy part of the carnival? What is the point of this?
Yeah, and then didn't lightning ever come?
I don't think it ever did. I think it was supposed to be a metaphor for the incoming storm of the carnival.
Yeah.
Like the carnival was supposed to be like a storm coming.
Yeah.
But I didn't. Yeah, lightning never
lightning
came.
Rod things. I mean, yeah.
What was the point? I don't know.
Right.
I didn't do any deep research into this.
I get the metaphor of the storm coming, but ultimately the lightning rod thing just seemed, I don't know. Anyway, that's how it started, and he was handing out flyers also, or did that come later?
I do not remember.
Anyway, this carnival is coming to town, and the strange thing is that it's coming on this train at 3 a.m, and it has like a supernatural feel, and nobody really understands why, but they feel it. And if I understood it correctly, when the train comes in and they're unloading it, the tents go up themselves.
That's what it seemed like, and then at the end of the book, I think they go down by themselves.
Right. So basically,
which again, if you take from it, remember in it, Pennywise, the dancing clown, he's actually like an entity from outer space or whatever, but he only comes every 30 years or something.
Yeah, I was gonna get there.
That's the same with the carnival. It only comes every certain
amount of years. Let's sum this up really briefly. This carnival comes to town. There's evil stuff going on. They're trying to get the kids involved in it. They don't want to be involved, or one of them does and one of them doesn't. And there's this whole like temptation thing going on. and they want to save the town from evil. And
the
save
motivation
family.
behind the carnival is, it seems that it's these people who are stuck in basically October. Like they're what are they called? The autumn people.
Yeah.
While we all live, winter, summer, fall, like we live all the seasons. These people are only in existence for the October, which I guess is all year round for them. I don't know, but these people, I guess they just need more people for the carnival because they keep turning people into these freaks, which is kind of, that's cool.
Yeah.
So they turn the people into the freaks. And then another aspect of this, which is a huge theme of the book, is aging, and it's not just its effects on us, but like there's nostalgia, just all the stuff. So you have old men and old women wanting to be younger, and there's this carousel that if it goes backwards, and it plays the funeral march backwards, which is really cool.
Yeah.
Awesome imagery in this book, by the way.
Yeah,
so it goes backwards, and that for every rotation around, you lose a year, and if it goes forward, you gain a year.
Right.
So Jim ends up getting convinced he wants to be older because this is the coming of age story. Kids, they just want to be older, but Will doesn't want to give up his childhood. Jim does. That's their the first friendship conflict, and they're really close buddies. And read from a modern lens, it almost reads like strange because I don't think kids interact this way anymore. Like how holding hands and hugging and just like all that stuff. It's like, it was a simpler time. But that's basically where we're at with the story. Is the carnival wants to take these kids. Why these two specifically, I'm not sure. Because even at the beginning, like the dad's like real, he's only 54, but because at 54 in 1950, might as well be 104. Like the way they treat this guy.
Yeah.
But his whole thing is he's an old man now, and he can't connect with his son because he had his son when he was 39, and back then I guess that was just unheard of. You probably got married in your 20s. So he wants to connect with his son Will, and then he sees this carnival coming, and there's just all kinds of feelings and stuff involved. But then, so he's tempted to be a younger man. Jim's tempted to be an older person. Will just wants everything to be normal. Then, like I said, Mr. Dark, his whole thing is he wants more freaks for his carnival, which are the regular citizens turn to freaks. And that's done in very heinous ways, which is also really fun.
Right.
I think that's pretty much the gist of it.
Yeah. There's a lot of...
And the word calliope was used 8,000 fucking times. And in my head, I kept reading it Calliope or something.
Right.
I was like,
and then I looked it up, and I was like, oh my God. And then knowing that it's pronounced Calliope makes it not work in the whole book.
No.
Like, to me, like it just doesn't
I fumbled
sound right.
it in my mind every time I read it. I was like, Calliope. Calliope.
It's like the one part of the poeticism that just jars.
Every time. And I'm not even joking. I swear, like every chapter that's used like 3 times.
And it's unfortunate because it would be a Calliope.
Yeah.
Like it would be. But that word is terrible. But so yeah, it's a lot of age, and there's a lot of like moral compass kind of themes in throughout the story. And so that's the story. And
before we go on, do you think this is maybe not the first, but one of the first books that really tackled like what it means to go through like childhood, adolescence, and grow up, like a coming of age story? I know you have like Huck Finn and Tom Sawyer and things like that, but it's not really about becoming adults.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's a lot of work I've read, pre this book, but I can't remember an actual coming of age story where it's children who the main theme of the book is them getting older and facing their fears, such as Earthbound.
Right. I don't know.
Because there's a lot that came after this book.
Yeah. I mean, I have a hard time thinking of examples, I guess. There's a lot of things that imply that, but I don't know if there's anything that directly deals with it.
Before this book, I've read a lot of things where it's usually war related, but it's young men becoming men.
Yeah.
And a lot of them back then were, they could be teenagers becoming men. So I've read that, but these are actual like 13-year-olds or whatever they are. They're like teens or preteens becoming teenagers and adults. In their case, they actually, at least Jim's case, he wants to skip the teenage. He just wants to be an adult.
Mm-hmm.
But before that, I can't really remember reading anything that hit just like that with the coming of age stuff.
Yeah. That's a good question. I don't know.
We should have looked that up.
We should have. And I haven't even read this, but the only thing, and it's probably a horrible example, but the only thing that's coming to mind is like, just because it deals with children, and I don't really know how the story ends up because I haven't read it. But I was thinking of Lord of the Flies. I don't know if that would be like a
Didn't that come out after this, though?
Oh, did it? I don't even know.
Was that William Golding?
Yeah.
I want to say that was after this, because this was written, I keep saying it, because also my edition has, I don't know if yours does, the whole influence of making this book was Gene Kelly.
Yeah.
That was weird. Like
I was
Ray
gonna
Bradbury.
talk about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, I'm going to get there because I feel like that's part of why it was written the way it is. But, I mean, that whole background.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
this was published, the copyright anyway, is 1962, and it took him 5 years. So he wrote this in the 50s.
Okay. And when you don't know when Lord of the Flies came out?
I'll look it up real quick. I have the technology. I want to say that was 70s or 80s, I think. I remember reading that in middle school, which seems like a horrible thing. The kid, Piggy, they hit the one, they called him Piggy, like fuck you, and then like they hit him in the head with a rock, not even a rock, a boulder. We watched the movie. I was like, this is terrible. I'm a child. I shouldn't be watching this. They stabbed a kid with a spear.
Oh my god!
It was you never saw that? Oh
no,
violence.
I don't know anything about. I mean, I know about it. I know of it.
Even the name Lord of the Flies, like it just makes you think of rot, death. It's terrible. They're just little English kids. Imagine if it was American kids.
Yeah, they're little proper people destroying each other.
Just immediately goes into this tribalism and they just murder each other. You're not even teenagers. Like, what are you doing? You haven't even gone through puberty and you're killing each other.
Yeah, I need to read that. I always feel like stupid for not having read that.
It's really good if you like that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Why do I have no service at my own house? What's happening? We had a giant storm, ladies and gentlemen, day before. Not a giant storm, but all the transformers in Washington blew up.
Oh, really?
Where I live. Not at my house, thank God, but everywhere else. And then like Comcast, who is my awful provider of internet and cable. I don't have cable anymore, but the internet has been down, and it's just been Wi-Fi's been real spotty. Like on and off.
Yeah, I never have internet down here.
Yeah, but I usually do because I do a lot of research in my studio. Yeah. Here, you discuss. I'll look up Lord of the Flies.
Okay. Well, I was gonna move on to the way the writing is in this book, and it's a little frustrating to me because I like Ray Bradbury so much. I've read the Martian Chronicles. I've read the Illustrated Man.
And he's usually such a smooth, easy to read type of writer.
Yeah,
like a Neil Gaiman type of.
I read the October Country, I think. These are all short story collections. Well, I think he calls Martian Chronicles a novel, but it's
short stories.
It's short stories, but it's different from like contemporary science fiction and fantasy and whatnot. But and it's none of it is like scary, like if it's ever supposed to be. Not to me, but it still has that like that like Slate like Stephen King feel, and it's smooth. He has really unique ideas that I could never think of. I read it, and even if it's not like the best story I ever read,
the idea just makes you mad that you're not that creative.
Yeah, exactly. And so I really love Ray Bradbury, and I want to keep reading his stuff. And from what I've heard, like looking into this book, most people feel the same way. Like they love Ray Bradbury, and reading this is a little bit frustrating.
When I read the reviews, I got that. I think what helped me though, and why I ended up liking it, is I went how I read Shakespeare, or like I was saying, I read the Iliad. What got me to really focus on reading the Iliad, as it's an epic poem, is I just changed my mind frame from going how I read a normal narrative of, okay, this is what's happening, this is what's going on, and kind of looking for the metaphor, and you sometimes you admire the similes and different things, which he uses a lot of those in here. But with this, as soon as I switched over to just flowing with it, like I just read it. I stopped trying to think, and I just read it and just let it wash over me, and completely decided that if I don't understand what is being said at times, which I would imagine some work of James Joyce would probably be similar, from what I heard people to read a lot of his stuff, is if you just understand that you're not going to understand. Like you have to know that, okay, if I don't understand this, it's fine. I don't have to look it up. I don't have because there's a lot of stuff where in this book, even though, which is probably why it's aggravating, is because it's simply written, but then you don't why am I not understanding this?
Yeah.
Why am I not picturing this? Why can't I understand what is exactly happening in this scene? But if you just read it, that doesn't matter. I'm just going to let it flow. It reads a lot better. I thought it was a lot more enjoyable that way because I was able to just to focus kind of on it's almost like watching some kind of indie French film. A lot of times you don't understand the the artistic liberties taken. You're like, I don't know what they're doing here. I don't know what the point of this is. It important? But if you just watch it as is and stop trying to think, it's a lot more enjoyable.
Yeah. And I guess I'm always reluctant to do that, to like let things just wash over me and just keep reading with a flow, because like I told you privately before that I'm always like self-conscious of how fast or slow I'm reading.
Yeah.
And if I let myself start to speed up my reading,
I feel like you're missing a lot.
Yeah, and there are so many books in my past reading experience I just don't remember anything about. Like I told you before, I read so many Kurt Vonnegut books. I read Mother Night, Player Piano, Dead-Eye Dick, something else. I don't remember anything about them except the character names if I look them up like on Wikipedia.
Yeah, that's a little tough. So
anytime I start to do that, I make myself slow back down and read deliberately again.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like almost unable to let it just wash over me. So what I do instead, I guess, is if there's a passage that seems like it's important and it's making a point and I'm not getting it, I have to reread it and reread it and reread it until I like really think. And that's where it's like poetry to me, because when I'm reading poetry, I read it, then I read it again, then I read it out loud, and then I start to pick it apart. And that's why I've been on the same poetry collection for the last like 2 months.
But if you do that with the whole novel, you're never going to finish the novel, or you're not going to enjoy the novel so much.
So after about halfway through or so, maybe a little past, probably like 3/4 of the way through, when it was finally getting to the climax and it was I got what the book was about, then I started to speed up because it was a lot of just the same kind of dialogue back and forth and the same points being made just again. By that time I sped up. But yeah, I mean, the thing that I can't get past is the dialogue, because
it's so unrealistic.
It's so,
in my opinion, it's
like theatrical. It's like a stage performance.
And the kids did not sound like kids, in my opinion. They sounded like they wouldn't even sound like adults. They sound like people that don't exist. I didn't think that was very well done.
Right. And I'm gonna make a point after this, but regardless, my point doesn't make up for this, I think. I cannot stand how everyone said, "Oh, Will. Oh, Jim. Oh, Dad."
Everything was very... by the way, Lord of the Flies, 1954. So he could have been... He could have read it and then immediately wrote this book.
Right.
I don't know. But, yeah, it was very Leave It to Beaver-esque.
Yeah.
That's where I said this book reads kind of aged, but not in a way classic literature does. It reads aged as in, I'm watching Leave It to Beaver. I'm watching I'm watching a very specific decade.
Right.
Like, so you read this like, that was definitely written in the 50s and 60s. Oh, shucks. Like, it's like that kind of stuff. And
then where I'm going to go next is back to the Gene Kelly thing, because originally this was a shorter idea that it was going to be turned into a screenplay, right?
Yeah, my book actually has the screenplay at the end.
Oh, does it? Yeah, and I mean, I've never seen that, but like now that we know it was made into a Disney movie, I'm just thinking like, I don't think he could get past that it was supposed to be a movie or a film.
He's still
So like it's a novel written with like the sensitivity of being a picture.
Now that you mention that, it does read as if the characters would be better understood if you saw their actions.
Yeah.
Like the way they talk to each other would probably be better understood if you saw their movements and their interaction physically.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times when you talk to people, a lot is said with the face, the eyes, even your body language, your hand movements, and it doesn't convey very well in the written form.
Right. But I also have heard that the movie isn't that great.
I watched the trailer earlier, and it didn't like the Illustrated Man. I didn't see any tattoos on him.
Yeah, I think because it's a Disney movie.
Yeah, they couldn't do. Well, that's his whole thing. Is the Illustrated Man.
I know.
That's his gimmick.
They probably just called him the Dark Man in that movie. I do want to watch it still because I read it. I mean, it'll probably ruin the book for me, but you know what? I didn't love it anyway.
Yeah, it'll be fun.
But I'm curious. But yeah, I couldn't get past all the dialogue. But I have an exception. And I might need to borrow your book because I didn't bring mine. But there was a part with Will's dad talking to just Will.
I really enjoyed that scene where they finally see each other for the first time as the people they are.
Yeah.
Because Will's like, oh, my dad's not just some old guy.
Yeah.
And then his dad is like, wait, he's, this is my son. I should be treating him as such and not just living in the library like he does.
Yeah. And maybe this can bridge us into actually analyzing it. Are you looking for something?
I was just looking for some passages that, some awful dialogue to read, but it was all just coming out. It's very annoying and just joined. I just want to give an example, but
I don't know if I'll be able to find it because your book's a little bit different.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you the page number. I don't remember what chapter that was even.
Shoot.
Are you talking about the part with the iron rungs with right before he climbs up the building? And
it's after. Yeah, I think so.
It's after they get in trouble.
It's when they're talking about happiness and death.
Yeah.
I really want to find it. Do you have anything while I look for this?
Well, this is one of them books that I recommend everyone read, but you might not like. Some people, they don't know what they like until they read it. I'm one of those people. If you told me that I would end up loving this book when I first started reading it, I would have told you were nuts because I did not like it at all. I was bored out of my mind. But I also wasn't in like I said, I wasn't in the right mind frame. Once I switched over to just flowing with the book, it was a lot more enjoyable.
Mm-hmm. That's just what made it for you? Like, just letting yourself...
Well, I started to appreciate the language more, too, because I wasn't dissecting it anymore.
Yeah.
So I was looking at it more as like how... And I read a lot of this book out loud to myself.
Mm-hmm.
And that helped because now, which is a trick I've learned with James Joyce, sometimes the way it's written is very purposeful in how it sounds. So listening to an audiobook of this, audio version of this book might actually be way better because then you catch not just like the poetic lyricism, you catch the rhythm.
Yeah.
And then that changes because like the dialogue, like I said, I hated the dialogue, but when you read it out loud it'd probably be better if it was actually read like a play, like people reading to each other, reciting the lines to each other. You could understand it better, but when you're just reading it at face value in your head, there's no rhythm, and it's just like, this is stilted and weird, and sentences shouldn't be formed like this, and people don't talk like this. But when you, like you said, with the theater aspect of it, if you look at it from that angle, and it's over the top, and even the, oh, Will, oh, Jim, oh, Dad, like if it was in like a play or something, you would be fine because it would be over the top, and you would understand what you're witnessing, and it actually gives to the whole prose is made to fit with the carnival theme, over the top. This is like a spectacle. So when you're reading it and you have that carnival in your mind as well, you feel like you're a part of something. You're witnessing something. Which is a complaint I saw a lot of people have is you're never deep into the book. You're always an outside observer because of the way it's written. A lot of people didn't like the book because they couldn't sink into it and be in that world.
Yeah.
But it's not meant to. It's like when you're watching a stage play, or in the example of the book, you're at a carnival show and the freaks are coming out and you're watching all this stuff. You're the spectator and you're supposed to be. You're not supposed to be a part of the scene, which is why I think in the end when the dad actually gets on stage with the gun and he's like, which I love that scene.
Yeah.
And then there's all the stuff that unravels there. That's almost like so ridiculous that it could never, you could never be in that world.
Right.
All you could do is watch it. I
guess that makes me think of how his idea for this. Did you read this? What about his childhood memory with Mr. Electrico?
I don't remember. I think I did, but when I finished that book, I was already focusing on the game I had to play, so okay. I didn't read a lot of the after stuff.
There's a character who initially is like chasing after the boys, and they end up on the carousel that ages or reverses age, and the thing's get out of hand, and it goes too far forward, and the guy just turns into like this desiccated, almost dead.
Which I love how he writes that guy being so old too.
Yeah, and
the descriptions.
That what ends up happening is the Dark Man or the Illustrated Man and the Carnies or whatever, they put him into this electric chair, and they feed electricity through him to keep him alive as long as possible until they can figure out how to get him better. So the whole idea of that, and I think they start calling him Mr. Electrico from that point forward, and that the whole Mr. Electrico thing came from a childhood experience that Ray Bradbury actually had at a carnival, where this guy he called himself Mr. Electrico, and I forget the details, but basically he I don't know if he pointed at Ray Bradbury in the crowd, or he talked to him personally outside of the show also, I think at this show he pointed at him and he said something about his future, he told Ray Bradbury as a kid that his soul was the soul of his dead best friend or something.
That's weird.
And he said something about his future, and from that point forward, I think that set
stuck
Ray
with him.
Yeah. So that's where the whole Mr. Electrico thing came from. My point was, maybe it's written like that because it's supposed to be like someone telling someone about their childhood memory. You'll never actually experience this.
Yeah.
But this is all the way that I felt about it when I experienced it.
So you get more emotion than you get strict detail. And
yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So I found the passage I was looking for. It's a little bit long, but I'll read it. So it's Will and his dad talking, and I think it's their first heart-to-heart.
And this is after Will and Jim were accused of burglary.
Yeah.
And then they had to talk to the cops. The lady's not going to press charges. They take Jim home, and then that's the first time the dad realizes these kids have these iron rungs they hook to nailed to the house so they can sneak out at night. And then he realizes, oh shit, me and the boy shared a lot, because he used to do the same things the kids did. They'd sneak out and stuff. So he finally gets to realize that they're share more in common than than he initially thought.
Mm-hmm. So he says, "It's Dad," said Will, his voice very faint. "Are you a good person?" "To you and your mother, yes, I try, but no man's a hero to himself. I've lived with me a lifetime, Will. I know everything worth knowing about myself." And adding it all up, the sum, as they come and go, and I mostly sit very still and tight. Yes, I'm all right. Then Dad asked Will, "Why aren't you happy?" The front lawn at, let's see, 1:30 in the morning is no place to start a philosophical. I just wanted to know, is all. There was a long moment of silence. Dad sighed. Dad took his arm, walked him over, and sat him down on the porch steps, relit his pipe. Puffing, he said, "All right. Your mother's asleep. She doesn't know we're out here with our tomcat talk. We can go on. Now look, since when did you think being good meant being happy?" "Since always." "Since now, learn otherwise. Sometimes the man who looks happiest in town with the biggest smile is the one carrying the biggest load of sin. There are smiles and smiles. Learn to tell the dark variety from the light. The seal barker, the laugh shouter, half the time he's covering up. He's had his fun and he's guilty. And men do love sin, Will. Oh, how they love it. Never doubt, in all shapes, sizes, colors, and smells. Time comes when troughs, not tables, suit our appetites. Hear a man too loudly praising others, and look to wonder if he didn't just get up from the sty. On the other hand, that unhappy, pale, put-upon man walking by, who looks all guilt and sin, why, often that's your good man with a capital G, Will. For being good is a fearful occupation. Men strain at it, and sometimes break in two. I've known a few. You work twice as hard to be a farmer as to be his hog. I suppose it's thinking about trying to be good makes the crack run up the wall one night. A man with high standards, too. The least hair falls on him sometimes wilts his spine. He can't let himself alone. Won't shift himself off the hook if he falls just a breath from grace." And it goes on about that. And eventually it says something interesting about death, too. Anyway, this was the first... Oh, wait, I think I found it. Okay, he says... It goes on a little bit, and then this is his dad again. He says, "Me, I'm the original sad man. I read a book and it makes me sad. See a film, sad. Plays, they really work me over." "Is there anything," said Will, "doesn't make you sad?" "One thing, death." Boy, Will started. "I should think that would. "No," said the man with the voice to match his hair. "Death makes everything else sad, but death itself only scares. If there wasn't death, all the other things wouldn't get tainted." This was the first part in the book, and this is about, I don't know, maybe a little. It's about halfway.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is where I made the turn from like just letting this book drag.
You started enjoying it a little bit more?
Yeah, because it was like, everything up to this point is just Jim and Will, running around the town, being chased by the Dark Man or whoever, Mr. Cougar, and all that stuff, the burglary thing. And it's like, it's kind of just like one event after another, and I'm like, why are these things happening though?
Yeah.
Like, what is going on? What is each person driving at? And then it comes to this part, and it's like, oh, this is like, it's not really about what's happening per se. It's about the kids growing up, and it's about the dad, as old as he is, like growing up, having realizations, and like talking about morality. So and this was just the first part in the book where the writing actually felt. I mean, it's still that like Leave It to Beaver-ish thing, but it still feels like a little bit real, like a conversation that might actually happen, albeit like maybe more natural.
Yeah,
like
none of the conversations in this book feel natural.
No, but and like. I ended up becoming, once the dad started talking more, I ended up really focusing on the fact that this book is about like parents also.
Yeah.
And that is my major tie to Earthbound, because I found it so interesting that that Earthbound is about these kids on this huge quest to defeat evil, and your mom is at home, and she's just like, well, go ahead, I guess. I'll be here, like, I don't know, doing the laundry, whatever she's doing.
Well, both the book and Earthbound show that despite the fact that these kids' world has just become so exponentially huge, it's still very small because they're children.
Yeah.
So in Earthbound, they're, fighting galactic monsters and doing all this stuff, but it's still about his little hometown, is just what he knows.
Yeah.
And the same with the book, like these kids, even though there's this carnival and all this evil that's come about, it's still just about like you said, the mom, the dad, just their little lives. They could see beyond their lives, but they can't live beyond their lives. They don't understand the world outside of what they already know.
Right. And it shows what, like, the confusion that comes from what parents choose to be. And I was preoccupied in Earthbound with the fact that your dad is just a voice that gives you money.
Yeah.
and it made me think, like, it made me connect that with Jim, because his dad was either dead or
gone. He wasn't in the picture.
Right. So it was just his mom, and it seemed like his mom wasn't very present either, I think.
Well, what I understood is his mom was very overbearing because the dad was gone and it's all she had left.
Well, maybe I'm confusing something.
Yeah, and then Jim rejects that because he's a kid, so that's why he's always escaping, going on adventures, putting himself in danger.
Yeah.
All this stuff. So the mom, just like in Earthbound, is not completely absent. She does show up here and there, but because Jim is off doing all this stuff, she's, you never really see her. Same with Earthbound. Ness is out there on these big adventures, and he still misses his mom from time to time, and you can go back and visit her, but she's never out in the world with him. So you get, yeah, but like it did say many times that the mom was too coddling of the boy.
Yeah, okay.
Almost to the point where if he got in trouble, it's the end of the world, but it's almost like, how like helicopter parents is like, well, not my son, like one of those things. Like he's still a good boy. Even if he killed somebody, he's still a good boy. Like she's never going to leave his side.
And then on the other side with Will, there's that point where they're in the library, right? And they're looking out the window because something's about to, like the Dark Man's about to do something to them. I think. And he's like screaming for his mom to like don't think he's wanting her to. Is he wanting her to help, or is he wanting her to?
He's conflicted because it's after they're captured by Mr. Dark. The dad, he had his hand broken. He's incapacitated, which apparently he's 100 years old in that scene. It's like, you're 54, dude. You could throw a punch. But anyway, like he's too old to help, really. So Mr. Dark he's taking the kids, and they're looking.
Saying Dark Man, don't I? It's Mr. Dark.
Yeah, it's Mr. Dark.
Mr. Dark.
Then they're looking out the window, and Will sees, I think, both their parents, Will and Jim's mom, walking together.
Yeah.
And then Will, I think he's trying to, I think he might make some noise, but their mouths are covered. And this guy has like a vice-like grip, so like only muffled screams come out. But then the mom does notice, kind of like, she looks at the building, looks at the windows, and Will's thinking to himself, it's like, oh, save us, please. But then he's so conflicted. He's like, no, I don't want mom to get hurt.
Yeah.
So it's like this back and forth in his own head where it's written in a very hard to follow way, because he wants the mom to go. He doesn't want her to save him, but he desperately wants her to save him.
Yeah.
So, and a lot of that, this book has a lot of that, where it's these dual ideas in the same sentences.
Yeah.
And it's confusing as fuck. Like, I don't know why he chose to write it like that, but there's just a lot of, like, Jim, I think another one, and I think Will had one too, where it's like about the confliction of going on the carousel and getting old or staying your age. And then the dad has it too, because like Mr. Dark, that one's done a little better. Mr. Dark's trying to convince him to go on the carousel. You could be 10 years younger. You don't have to be this old man anymore. And then he's like conflicted, but it's just like all this fucking nonsense about, oh, I gotta get on the carousel and I could be older and I can live, but I can't do that. I'm a kid. I don't want to do that. I need to do that. And it's like, okay, like, it's just get on or don't get on.
But at that moment with both of their moms outside of the library, I was just thinking, when was the last time they saw their kids?
This is the 50s. You could just go out and run around and know.
I guess that's the difference.
This whole book, they're not just out at midnight, but when the carnival comes to town, it's 3 a.m. Yeah. The kids are just out at 3 a.m. And even the dad, that scene you just read, when he realizes there's the rungs up the house, and he's talking to Will about, like, you know, how often have you gone out at midnight? And then, like, this is the first time. Well, you go out a lot, don't you? And he's like, yeah, I do. And then he's like, well, it's okay, because I used to do that too. Yeah. But we're looking at this from a modern lens. What's the worst that's going to happen to you if you're running around town? Because they run around graveyards and just everywhere, running amok at midnight.
Yeah.
And it's fine in 1950s when nothing's open, nobody's out, there's no problems. Right. Probably even bars weren't even open then. I don't know. But because this is very Leave It to Beaver town. But if you look at a modern lens, it's like, no, you're going to die immediately, kid. Like, somebody's going to kidnap you. You're going to get trafficked. You're going to get put in a van. You're going to get shot. Like, don't go out of your house at night. Don't go out of your house during the day. Like, you can't even have kids play in the yard by themselves unattended now. But back then, you know, we didn't lock doors. Right.
And I don't know. I just had this obsession with the parents. And even though it's the 50s, I think it still reflects, like, you know, what parenting does, because you see such a difference between Will and Jim, and like, even though Will's dad he feels bad because he's older and he's always out, like, he goes to bed and then he goes out to the library in the middle of the night, so like his dad's half not there, and it's almost like he hasn't talked to his kid until now.
That's how it's written. He hasn't. They never had a conversation and don't know each other until that scene you read.
Right. And but like, even so, it's like he has a complete family and he has the morality, and then
Jim is immoral because he comes from a broken home.
Right.
That's it's very 50s how it's written with that.
It is, but I mean, I think some of that's still relevant. Some people come from broken homes and they end up being better than people with complete families.
Well, the thing with this, because I think it's supposed to parallel Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn.
Is it?
Because Tom Sawyer has like the loving family. Huck Finn has the alcoholic dad that's never around, and he's pretty much a bum. But this kind of, like I said, parallels Huck Finn and Tom Sawyer, because Jim, who is this rambunctious, dangerous kid, like he leaps into danger. He doesn't seem to care about his well-being that much. But his being, I guess in the 50s was a broken home because he just has a mom. But it's like, it sounds like he's just living in a nice house with a loving mom.
That's true. Yeah.
Like, there's no reason to be like this. But, Will's the good one because he has both mom and dad. But the dad's not even around anyway.
Yeah.
He just ignores his wife and kid. Like, it's okay. I mean, back then, I guess that was common. I'm going to go work in the office all night. I'm going to, read the paper and sit on the couch and smoke a cigar and read a book, and then I'm going to go to bed and never talk to my family. And that was fine. But that's a wholesome upbringing, I guess, compared to Jim, who didn't have his dad to be absent. Like,
Right.
stupid.
But I was like obsessed with it because I haven't mentioned this yet, but my first chapbook of poetry, which will come out next year, it's largely about my experience with my dad, who was there,
Yeah.
but sort of like distant, or I don't know. He was there. It was just it's my point is just it goes to show like the difference that parenting can make, and especially if you know families that have what you're missing.
Yeah.
Or friends who've had in their childhood what you've missed.
So you get to know that kind of life exists. You just don't have it.
Right. Yeah, and there's like an acceptance thing there, and I think, yeah, I don't know. I'm probably overanalyzing it because I relate to that aspect, but I guess I just see that in like Jim, because he's like, he ends up getting turned into like. They both get like turned into zombies almost. Like they're
like
under
wax figures almost.
Yeah, they're under the control of Mr. Dark, and they have to do whatever he says. And Will gets broken out of it by his dad calling him, and Jim has a really hard time coming out of it.
But even after they first had the experience with the carousel and stuff, Jim's just like a big fucking idiot for most of the book.
Yeah,
like he was fine at the
piss you
beginning,
off.
but then he's just like, I don't know, he's just stupid.
He's like, you like prefer him in the beginning. And then
Yeah.
he's like, just stop it.
Well, this book also got me thinking about, which I don't know, Bradbury went too far into thinking when he wrote this, because he mentions how, like, say you're a 54-year-old man and then you decide you're going to go back to being 20.
Yeah.
Or a kid or whatever. Now you're going to be alienated from your friends. They're not going to talk to you anymore because they won't have anything to relate to you. But since you still have your adult brain, you can't relate to the people of that age either.
Right.
But then I was thinking, well, I mean, if you physically grow younger, your brain's going to go back to reverting before it's fully formed. So I don't know how well that works. Then, like, he brought up the kids, which is a better point. So say Jim does decide he goes from 13 to 22. You're still a 13-year-old in your brain. Like, what? You're not going to understand. You skipped all of your adolescence pretty much. Like, you're growing up. So you're not going to understand how anything works. You're going to have to get a job, and it's going to be terrible. But obviously, a kid's not going to think about that. He just wants to be bigger.
Right.
Which that used to be like a major theme in fiction all the way up till the 90s. You think of like what was that, Tom Hanks movie in the 80s, Big? Yeah, it's like there's always a theme about kids getting big and like becoming adults, and it was like a very easy way to show the coming of age kind of stuff. But I never, like when I was a kid, I was like, I don't want to be big yet. I just want to be a kid. Like I never felt that. I mean, yeah, you want to be older at times, but I'd like to be able to drive or things like that. But you never just wanted to be big and
right. You want the freedom, but you don't.
That's all it was. Is you wanted the freedom, basically.
Yeah, you don't want the responsibility.
And in this, it does bring up like the point too, is like the physicality. So you don't want to just be like this weak little kid who can't fight back. You want to be able to handle yourself, which then Will's dad is the opposite. He's like, oh, I would like to be younger so I can handle myself because I'm too old now.
Yeah.
But then at the end, like he starts running. He's like, is my heart going to explode and I'm going to die because the kids are running through a field or something? And then he starts jogging and he's like, oh, I know I could keep up with them. And then he realizes he's not as old as he thought all along. Because who knew a chain smoking 54-year-old isn't actually that old.
Yeah.
But in the 50s, he might as well, like I said, might as well have been 105. Apparently, you just died at 60, so he was on borrowed time. That's one of those things where the age of it it didn't age well.
Right. Now, I want to go back to one more thing about the dialogue that bothered me. I had it in my notes and I didn't say it. The parts where their dialogue seemed like he was trying to cut words.
Yeah.
Like,
there was a lot of parts that just cut off abruptly.
What you doing here? What you want from him? Things like that. It's like
I didn't get that why they were talking like that.
Yeah, it was because that's why it came off to me like someone was like, this book's a little bit too long.
Yeah.
So you're just like, well, maybe I can get my point across and just cut.
Such
Like,
stupid. You went from Kevin from The Office, just why use more word when few word do good? Like, it's so stupid. It doesn't work like that, Kevin.
he's just cutting prepositions and articles just to
do it.
Yeah, that was so strange. So I wanted to talk about that part where they're explaining the autumn people that we referenced earlier. When we started talking about Pennywise, I was like, oh my God, Stephen King literally stole that from this book, because the whole thing about Pennywise is that he just comes back even if you kill him, he comes back every so often. Even
the research scene, because the way it's figured out in this book, the dad goes to his library that he loves so much, finds a bunch of books on carnies and old newspaper clippings, and just reads about every time this exact carnival has come to town, all the way from like the 1800s, maybe even 1700s. I forget how far back it went. And then it was the same people, like the same company, and it's like every 30 years or something, or whatever. I forget the time. I think it is every 30 years.
Yeah.
And then I was just like, yep, Stephen King not only cribbed that whole idea for Pennywise coming every, I think it's 30 years, but also the library scene where they figure it out.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm only going by the movie. I haven't read the book, but I think the book's the same. Like, they go to the library and they figure it out that Pennywise. But it's like, you just stole that.
Yeah, it's like straight just cut and paste almost.
Jacked it.
That was surprising to me. I mean, and at the end of the day, one more thing about that this book reminded me of Earthbound. There was that scene. Oh, it was the scene where I think Jim and Will are being turned into like those like whatever zombie things by the witch.
Yeah.
And she's like slowly cutting off all their senses.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, that was like the freakiest part to me, I think.
Yeah,
but
that was pretty freaky.
It reminded me of an Earthbound when the poo scene when
he gives himself up to I don't even know what it is, spiritual power, and just cuts his arms, his legs, his ears, all of his senses. Like, it's pretty freaky.
It's such a claustrophobic idea.
I don't like it.
But anyway, that was just another link.
There was not a strong female protagonist in this book.
Yeah, you're right.
Because there's only doubt, unlike Earthbound, where Paula is the main character who saves the day. This has, I think her name's Miss Foley, their teacher. Mm-hmm. She gets reverted to a child on the carousel, which never is resolved, which pisses me off. All these people that got turned to freaks, I guess they just stayed freaks. They just ran away at the end. It's like, oh, I guess we don't know what happened to them. She gets turned to a little girl, and she's just absolute. They find her crying in the rain. It's a very heart-wrenching scene. Yeah. It's very disturbing because she's just like hysterical, sobbing. Nobody would help her, but they just think she's a little girl. And he makes a point in every character, if they get turned young, their eyes are still old. So they knew weird. It was her, but it's like, oh, every like female character just, mainly it was just her, I guess. There wasn't too many female characters. It's like they're just fainting women and just basically dumb, useless side pieces.
Yeah, because like from the start, which I didn't get until like till the end of the book, but from the start, Miss Foley is like, you don't even see it happen, but she's already been manipulated like paper by Mr. Cougar. Like, she's just automatically going with whatever they tell her. Yeah, weak character, unfortunately.
Well, 1950s, what do you expect?
Yeah. So I guess my main feel about this book is that it has so much going for it that gets disappointed by the way it feels, by the dialogue and the way, like how we talked about earlier, how it's like you can't get inside it. Mm-hmm. So when we're talking about it, it's really cool, and like when I listen to other people talk about it, it sounds so cool. It's like it's a really like it sounds like a great book, and it is for certain things. But like it has the imagery, it has really good coming of age and like moral compass ideas, and but by the end, even the ending was like, what is it, like Gone with the Wind when they're going off into the sunset?
Pretty much.
It's just, if it didn't feel so cheesy, which it didn't have to, and I think there's reasons that it did come off that way, but my second read through, which was this one, I enjoyed it more than the first time I read it in high school when I just didn't really get
Yeah.
why you read books. Like I enjoyed them but didn't get them. I didn't enjoy it in high school. This time I took things from it at least, but it still isn't one of my favorite reads.
I think that Ray Bradbury focused more on how the story was written versus how he told the story.
Yeah.
He focused, it's a very cool story, but it was about the prose versus the actual story. And in my summation here, which I think maybe Stephen King said, I don't remember, but it's usually if you focus on the writing over the story, it's not going to be that great. Like, you always should be a story first if you're writing genre fiction anyway. If you're writing literary fiction, okay, but this isn't supposed to be literary fiction. I don't understand. From what I understand anyway. But what do you think, we'll end on this, what do you think about the ending message where they're on the broken carousel, or before they break it, they're contemplating whether they should use it, and then they realize they're the carnival people. Like, the carnival people don't end, the evil doesn't go away because it's in all of us. So as long as, like, if they're willing to use it, because they use it, we'll use it for good, you know? We could just keep it started off, we'll just make ourselves a little younger, and then we'll be better, we'll be healthier and happier, and then we could bring our friends aboard. And then it actually showed exactly how he tells exactly how the carnival formed. Yeah. He did it very succinctly too, which I liked. It was only like a paragraph, but he explains exactly how the carnival people came to be. Yeah. And then like the whole thing was like they weren't evil originally. It's just, they wanted to basically we all want to live forever, right? Because we can't understand what it's like not to exist. And then if we have this ability to just keep making ourselves younger, what's wrong with that? Just shave a couple, not like anything extreme, just a couple years off. So you don't have to hit old age and you don't have to suffer and, fall apart. But then it's like, oh, that's not good, because then you're going to bring your friends aboard and then everybody's going to do it. And then all of a sudden it'll be corrupted.
It actually reminds me of something that you said on your last episode of, I think it was your last episode of Drunken Pen, about I think it was, maybe it was next to the last one, I don't know, it was one of your episodes when you were reading God, I don't remember, but I know you've been reading 120 Days of Sodom periodically.
Oh yeah, I've been reading some excerpts from that.
But you said something about morality at some point. It's kind of, I don't think you were talking about that book at that point. I think you were later on.
We just read the excerpt from that, made fun of it. We actually haven't been reading the book.
No, yeah, but you said something like morality is like knowing what's wrong and choosing not to do it, no matter how hard it is. And I think it comes down to that, because even though it depends how you develop your moral compass, and so it depends who you are, but fortunately they have their dad there who has experience with life.
He can help.
And so he gets to say, because if it was just the kids, they would have used it. They probably would have. But he gets to say, this isn't inherently a bad thing, but good things can turn bad. It's sort of like a all things in moderation thing. But
well, it's easy to do the right thing when you don't know the consequences, or there are no consequences. Yeah. So for the boys, they couldn't see the consequences of their actions if they were to go through with it. The dad did. He understood because he's lived. So he knew that if they went down that road, they would be just like the carnival people, the autumn people. Right.
So I think it just comes down to that. Like it ends with like just a moral message, just to like, you're gonna confront things and it's kind of like what he talked about in that happiness passage I read. How people who look happy all the time are often the ones who are like nefarious. Yeah. The carousel can be a really good thing, and it sounds really good, but at its core, it can turn you.
Goes against nature, so people. Yeah, you're never gonna end up using it for. Well, that's what am I thinking of here? This has been done in fiction a lot, but whenever somebody, I'm thinking of the Ring from Lord of the Rings, obviously. Stupid. Yeah. in Lord of the Rings, you get the ring, and if you're a good person, you think you can wield that for the greater good of humanity.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a corrupted thing to
Right.
begin with. You
Right.
never can. So all it'll do is corrupt you.
Yeah.
So no matter how good your intentions are, if it goes against nature, it's never going to work. It's always going to end up poorly.
Yeah.
At the
That's
best.
It's a good parallel. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, Bryce, how, you know what we'll do since this is a comparison? What did you enjoy more, playing Earthbound or reading Ray Bradbury's Something Wicked This Way Comes?
I think they're really good counterparts because I hated a lot about both.
Yeah?
But I liked a lot about both of them. I think I probably... it's hard. You go first.
I think I enjoyed the book more than Earthbound. One, I didn't have to read the book for months, which helps. Mainly just because a lot of Earthbound was tedious, and as fun as the game was and interesting as the story was, I felt it's a little more surface level.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, I really did like Earthbound, so I don't know.
I know it's hard because
it's hard comparing a book to like what you enjoy more, because usually people are gonna say the game.
Because I want to. My first instinct was to say the game but I think because it was like my first game back into video games after not playing for such a long time, so it just felt good, even though it was ridiculous and absurd and hard at times, and I didn't feel like learning it myself. But ultimately, I really like after the passage that I read, I really liked reading it. But
I think what we could take away from both, the story of both things were great.
Yeah.
But maybe the execution wasn't always done to the best. Some
I
parts are great and some are not.
Yeah, I would agree.
So maybe a wash. Equal.
Yeah, that's fair.
Like both of them equally.
I can't pick one. Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't pick one. Because Earthbound, I love the story and the weirdness and the creativity. There was a lot of and it goes with the time period and the gameplay and just things we discussed on the episode. Just like, could have did with all that.
Yeah.
So I could have did without Ray Bradbury's specific prose style here. If he just wrote it like a straight narrative, and you still have, it's like the creativity and stuff, but just told the story, I would have liked it probably more.
Yeah. So we have a legendary game and a legendary book, and they're just all right.
They both have aged okay.
Yeah.
But not great.
Right. But I think we chose. I think it ultimately, even though we wanted to read it, I think it was.
This was
good
a better
choice.
fit. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's too adult.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have fit Earthbound with the adult nature. Mainly just the monsters and the growing up themes and stuff. But it would have been really too jarring to go from Earthbound to it, I think.
Yeah. That's probably true.
Yeah. This was because this also fits the aesthetic. While Earthbound's not supposed to be, I think Earthbound's supposed to be like 1980s, early 90s type of aesthetic. And this is the 50s. Those go better than, it was also supposed to be like the 80s and stuff, but it's like the harsh, like it's all the dark side of everything.
Right, right.
Like you think of like kids getting molested and beat and people dying and just awful things. Earthbound is lighthearted.
Yeah.
It's not supposed to be like, you kill monsters, but you don't actually kill anything, I don't think. You tame people.
Right.
Like hurt. If you hurt somebody in Earthbound, that's like a major event, because it's like, like when in what is it, Magic Can't, Ness is like when he talks to his other selves and stuff, and he talks to some of his villains, and he's like, "Oh, you hurt me that day," and it still hurts, and you're like, "Oh fuck."
Yeah.
Like even if it's a bad guy that you defeat, you feel bad.
Yeah.
And this book's a little more harsh with that because it's supposed to be a little more realistic, but even so. Other than like the old guy and stuff, not too many people really like die or anything.
All right.
So, takeaway, I enjoyed both. Probably will never play Earthbound again or read this again. Because I beat Earthbound twice, so.
Yeah.
And you read this book twice.
This worked out perfectly.
So what are we doing for the next episode?
So
what's our next game?
Stay tuned, everybody, because for our next episode, we're going to be talking about the 1985 video game Deja Vu. A Nightmare Comes True.
We need to see if we can crib the music, because the music I believe you can use. I've seen YouTubers use the music from those games.
Oh, yeah?
It's a point-and-click game, and it's a lot of fun. It's a mystery game, but I think we could incorporate the music onto the episode. It'd be great, because the music is fantastic on all those point-and-click games. Like, they're so legendary.
Yeah, definitely. I love that part of it. In the episode after Deja Vu, the literature that we think is a good fit is going to be Raymond Chandler's short story, Blackmailers Don't Shoot.
His first ever story.
Yeah, I think it's his first ever story.
I'm excited for that, because we did the Big Sleep on the Drunken Pen Writing podcast, and we really enjoyed that. That's the only Raymond Chandler I've read. I have this giant collection on the table, and I've been meaning to go through it, but I'm going to go through a noir year, I think.
Oh, nice.
Just going to read, because I have a bunch of old noir. I have a bunch of hard case books, too, or at least a couple hard case books, but I like to go through that stuff from time to time, and I want to read more Raymond Chandler and Walter Mosley, but I feel like the Raymond Chandler would be a good fit, since the Deja Vu is set in the 40s? 20s. Set in the 20s, I think.
I don't know.
I think it's set in the 20s.
Okay.
There was something... We'll talk about it on the episode.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, so if you're enjoying the show, if we're on our host, be sure to follow or subscribe, and as soon as we do establish a social media presence, you should follow us on there and watch our words. You can look for our playing and reading schedule in the show notes, so you can play and read along. And if you have any game and book recommendations to go together, we don't have any way for you to tell us those just yet, but as soon as we have an email set up for the show,
we'll get there.
Maybe I'll put that in the show notes as well, and you can look for that by the time this goes up. Caleb, do you want to talk about your stuff?
If you want to listen to some lowbrow literature talk and a lot of writing talk, because we are all writers in this studio, you could go and listen to the Drunken Pen Writing Podcast. You can find us at DPW Podcast on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. No, we do not have fine video of us on YouTube doing the podcast. No one needs to see our faces that much. But you can listen on there, because we have subscribers. I don't know why. People like listening on YouTube. I guess if you have like the subscribe to it, you can listen to the music while your phone's on, not shut off mode, but you don't have to have the screen on, basically.
Yeah.
You can also check out my work at calebjameskk.com. That's my author page, where hopefully I'll get some goddamn publication history updates soon. I also need to put more stories on there, but you can basically find everything I do on there as well. And that's about it.
All right.
I'm so used to on my other podcast having Spencer's fake OnlyFans. I always shout out, but he's not here today. So, and those folks who listen to this have no idea what I'm talking about. So you have to listen to the DPW podcast.
Yeah, you'll find out
to know the stupid thing I'm referencing.
Well, thank you all so much for listening to Arcade Bookshop. So go stick a controller in one hand and your book in the other.
Oh, that's a difficult task, but I like it.